So as an agent, it's really important that you not only work with buyers, but ultimately many of you are going to want to start working with sellers. Sellers and listings are really where most of us want to be. That's where, we get the most return, because once you have a listing, you're basically sitting back and waiting for that buyer to come along. As long as you have it priced right, and as long as you have everything in motion, you've got all your marketing in motion, the property should sell itself. So as a listing agent, that's what a lot of us like to do. We like to get to 5, 10, 15 listings in our inventory. So that's what, as an agent, even if you're new to the business, that's what you should be striving for, is to be a listing agent. Because again, the ones that hold the listings are the ones that are going to get those sales. So we're going to be talking about listings today, and I'm specifically going to be showing you how to fill out the various documents that are related to getting a listing and putting it in the MLS. So I want to go ahead and share my screen. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to, and then ask the question directly. So let me go ahead and start my recording. Perfect. Okay, and let me share my screen. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is going to be the what to do when you first get your listing. Okay, so first let's start from the very beginning. You get your listing appointment. You have a seller that says to you, you know what, I'm ready, let's go. I love your presentation. You're the right agent for me. Let's go ahead and get this property listed. So where do we start? Well, the very first thing you want to do is go into your MLS, and this is just the Stellar platform. By the way, can I get a thumbs up, or can somebody give me a little heads up? Just, I want to make sure you can see my screen right now. So can somebody give me a little thumbs up to let me know? Perfect. Thank you so much, Fabian. So the first thing you start with is you go to the Stellar MLS, and you go right here to either IMAP or Realist. One of these two are related to the county public records on this property. The very first thing you want to find out before you start listing a property is, I want to know who the actual sellers are. Because let's say this example, let's say you're talking to somebody and you think you're talking to the owner of the property, but in all actuality, you're talking to the son or the grandson or the spouse or whatever it may be. So it's really important to make sure we know who the legal sellers are according to the legal documents. So you could use either Realist or IMAP. I went ahead and I used Realist, and I searched for my subject property. In this case, I'm using one of our listings that we currently have listed out of the Celebration office. And when I pull up the document, I just search by the county, I search for the address, and here it is. Here's the document. So if I pull up that document, I can now see some important things about this property that we're going to be using to list it. So there's about three different things that we're going to be using from these public records. The first is we have the street address, so we know that the street is correct. We even have all of the public records information, bedrooms, bathrooms, as is recorded in the county records. I then have both of my owners. So I have both of my owners' information right here. So I know that there are two legal sellers. Both of their names have to go on the listing agreement. So it's important to have this document so you not only know who's on it, but how do they spell their names. So this should be where you're getting the seller's information on what to put on the listing agreement. The other important information to look at from these public records is going to be the tax ID information, which is right here. Now, you'll remember from your old real estate classes, we had something called parcel ID. That is section, township, range, subdivision number, all of those things. That is very important. Think of that as your social security number for this property. So we want to make sure we remember that. And then the other thing to remember is this legal description, because this legal description is going to be going on the listing agreement. Okay, so those are a few things that you're going to be getting from these public records. Okay, the main thing is really just verifying that the sellers who you think you're talking to are indeed the sellers that are on that tax record. Okay, So once I've got that, and I'm in a habit where I print things out. So I would print this out. I would have it that way when I'm doing my listing agreement, I have the spellings of their names. I know everything about the property. Not to mention, it's a good thing to also upload this into Dotloop because you want to have this document in there as well. It's really the tax information, the public information on this particular property. So now I've discovered all of that information. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going into Dotloop. So Dotloop is our transaction manager that we have for all of your forms, documents, addenda, all of that good stuff. So if I look over here, let me move this out of the way. If I look over here under my templates, let me show you. Under the templates, you have right here your listing packet. If you see where I'm pointing right here, if you click on listing packet, these are all of the available forms you have for listings. Does not mean you have to use every single one of them. These are just the forms that we have available for you for listings, okay? The ones I'm going to be going over today are all located on this particular listing packet. Okay, so if you don't know where I am, as long as you can get into your Dotloop office account, under templates right here, let me show you. Right here under templates, up here at the top, if you click on it, you're going to see right here, listing packet. Okay, that's where all of the forms I'm talking about are located today. So I'm going to go ahead and get into some of those forms. Let me go into one of my loops. So we're going to be using the example of one of our current office listings. So one of our agents, Geeta, out of the Celebration office, has a wonderful listing. It was really well done. So I decided to use hers, give her some props. Hopefully maybe somebody can sell it out there, but this is using her example of a property that she currently has listed. So I'm going to portray myself as the listing agent and fill out the paperwork as if I'm the listing agent. But obviously Geeta is. If you have a buyer, make sure you contact Geeta. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is going to be the most important form that you're going to see when it comes to listings, which is the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. This is our actual agreement between our brokerage and your seller. This is not between the agent and the seller. This is between the brokerage and the seller. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through this, and I'll try to get through it pretty quick, but I do want you to understand certain parts of this agreement that are important. It is also crucial that you also read all of the agreements, the contracts. Make sure before you fill something out and send it to somebody that you've read the document that you're sending, because you'll understand it more. Now, the exclusive right of sale listing agreement is very self-explanatory. If you read it, read every word of it, you will understand all of the various clauses that are in there. So the first thing I want to talk about is why we call it the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. So it is called this because we are the only brokerage that will be allowed to represent the seller in this transaction. So no other brokerages are allowed to represent themselves as a listing agent. And it also means that even if the seller finds a buyer themselves, we would still be getting a commission on this. So there's a lot of protection here, not only for you to get paid, but also for us as a brokerage to make sure that we are, we have this agreement with the seller. So the first thing I do is I fill out the seller's full name. And again, I get this directly from that Realist. The whole reason why I showed you this is so that you know where the seller's information is. So you have the seller's seller 1, seller 2, put both of their information as it is directly into the agreement. So you want to make sure that it's spelled properly, make sure that it's exactly the way it appears on Realist or IMAP, whichever one you're using. The broker, of course, is Century 21 Coyote. And now we're going into the actual agreement. Again, this is the most important part of your listing. This is us and the seller agreeing to list the property. So the first thing you see is the start date. You're going to want to put the start date on the date that you want this property put in the MLS. Now remember, we cannot advertise a property unless it's in the MLS. In fact, if you start advertising a property on social media, it needs to be within the MLS within 24 hours. They're very particular about that. We can't be false advertising or anything like that. So it's very important that you time out when the start date of your MLS entry is going to be. Usually we do our listings for about 6 months. Some agents get them for 12 months. So this would be when the start date of the listing is and when the end date of the listing is. Okay, so that's what's considered the termination date. Okay, as we scroll down, we have the street address. Well, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's the street address of the property. And then we have the legal description. And this is taken again directly from Realist. As you remember, back on this screen, if you scroll down, you have the legal description right here. You're just going to either copy and paste that or type it right into here. And that's where the legal description is going to go. Under personal property, this is anything including appliances that is being included or will convey with the sale. So if you're including things like if the seller is saying, I'm including my washer, dryer, dishwasher, hot water heater, refrigerator, all the various things they're including, put that in here. This is their statement of what's being included with that sale. Right here is where you're going to show whether or not it is occupied by a tenant. So if there's a long-term tenant in the property, you're going to put that there, and you're also going to put the when their lease term expires. Now, if it's a short-term rental property or vacation home property, you do not need to put that it's currently occupied. We're only talking about long-term rentals in this case. As we scroll down, very self-explanatory. Line 22 is going to be the sales price of this home. So this is what's going to be listed in the MLS. This is what the price that the seller has agreed to. And then under financing terms, this is the type of buyer that the seller is willing to entertain. So maybe the seller says, hey, I'll take all cash offers. I will take all offers that are conventional loans. I'll take VA buyers and I'll take FHA buyers. If they take all of them, then mark all of them. Not everybody will though. So just keep in mind, oops, let me go ahead and make that. Not everybody is going to want to do VA or FHA. If the property is not in very good condition, or if it's not going to pass a VA or FHA appraisal, then you may not want to accept those type of offers. But almost every property, you can pretty much guarantee that cash or conventional are going to be acceptable offers. The next part, I'm just going to breeze over because we normally don't use these two options. The first is if the seller is holding a purchase money mortgage. So this is if the seller is going to be doing seller financing. The second is if they're doing an assumption of an existing mortgage. So this would be if the buyer is taking over an existing mortgage for the seller. That doesn't normally happen nowadays. Most lenders are going to say, we want there to be a new buyer with a new lender. But if that's the case, you would go through and fill this out. We don't see these two very often, so I'm not really going to focus too much time on these. Throughout the rest of the agreement, there are important things that I want you to be aware of. So again, read every word of this agreement because you have to understand what are the different responsibilities of both the seller and the buyer. So this goes into extensive detail about what are our tasks as an agent. What are the responsibilities of that seller? This little function right here talks about if the seller is willing to pay any sort of mortgage discount or closing cost. To be honest, if they're talking about closing costs and prepaid expenses, I like for this to be on a separate line. But you have the option if the seller is paying down a mortgage discount, you can put the amount right there that they're going to be paying. Then it goes into broker responsibilities, and these are broker obligations. So it says that we are going to make diligent and continued efforts to sell the property. Just as we have certain responsibilities that the seller has to do, we have responsibilities as well. We have to be marketing that property. We have to be diligently doing something to try to sell that property. So it says that we're going to make those efforts to diligently and continue to sell the property. It also says that we're going to be placing the property in the MLS. Now, as a member of the multiple listing services, it is our agreement with the MLS that we have to put all of our active listings into the MLS within 1 day of marketing the property. So when we list a property, we have to be putting it in the MLS unless the seller opts out of that. Okay, so it's assumed that every one of our properties, every one of our listings is going into the MLS unless the seller directs us otherwise in writing, and we'll be going over that in just a second. down to broker authority, and then says that the seller gives us the right to market the property to the public. This means they're allowing us to do things like flyers, yard signs, digital marketing, social media, brokerage websites, all of these different things to try to market that property to a potential buyer. It also includes marketing the property to other real estate agents. We're going to be putting appropriate signage on the property, and we're going to be, obviously displaying the property everywhere we can. If you have a particular seller that says to you, I don't want my property address to be on the MLS, there is a way for us to opt that out. Now, I would not suggest this. When you're advertising, you want your property to be syndicated on every website. You want everybody out there in the general website public to be able to view your property. However, let's say, for example, you have a celebrity. Maybe it's a local athlete. Maybe it's maybe it's the sheriff or a mayor or whoever it is you're working with. They do not want their address publicly displayed on things like Zillow, Realtor.com. They can actually opt out of that. Okay, so they can't opt out of it. I really don't suggest it unless you have that special type of buyer. Maybe, a celebrity or a well-known politician, something like that. Otherwise, make sure you're advertising this property everywhere. Right here, though, it does allow the seller to opt out of the MLS. Now, why would a seller ever want to not be in the MLS? I don't know. Most of the time, our fellow agents in other brokerages and even within our company are the ones that are bringing the buyers to us. We don't really want to shut that off. We don't want to shut outside brokerages from being able to see our properties. So that's why it's so important for us to advertise all of our properties to make them shareable within the MLS. If for whatever reason your seller decides that they do not want to put it in the MLS, they can opt out. But it does say that the seller understands that if they do that, we're not going to be placing a sign on the property, and we're going to be very limited on our ability to sell this property. If you don't want to advertise in the MLS, really the only way we're going to be able to market this property is within our own office. So it's marketing to fellow agents. So you want your seller to be open to advertising, displaying the property on multiple websites, getting the syndication out there. The more exposure you have on the internet, the better your chances of getting a fast buyer to that home. This agreement also allows us to obtain information regarding the present mortgage on the property, give them a comparable a CMA to potential buyers. Now, this next section right here on line 68 is where we talk about lock boxes. So if you're planning on using a lock box on the property to be able to show it, make sure you're checking this box right here. Okay, so this basically says that the seller is giving us permission to use a lockbox for security purposes. Now, I am a firm person or firm believer that you have to use an electronic lockbox. Go and invest, go down to the Board of Realtors, invest in a couple of electronic lock boxes if you have a listing. They are the most secure way of protecting your seller. They're going to give them peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind. But right here is where it says that the seller is allowing us to use a lockbox to show and access the property. Right here on line 72 is where it says whether the seller wants us to withhold verbal offers. There's a lot of sellers that you call me with a verbal offer, you know what? I want to see it in writing. I'm that type of person. If I've got somebody that's calling me and I have a listing and they say, I'm going to give you a verbal offer, I'm one of these people that says, put the pen to paper. You send me an actual offer. I want to see your buyer's signature. I want to see a pre-qualification letter. So in this case, your seller can request, oops, would I lose it? Your seller can request to withhold verbal offers. They can also say that, you know what, once I have a binding offer, I don't want to see anything after that. So they can also say withhold all offers once the seller accepts a sales contract. The next category, which is line 73, says that we're going to be acting as a transaction broker. Now, as a transaction broker, it means that we can represent at Century 21 Cariotti both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Okay, so that's something that's really important to us because we have 300 plus agents, right? So we want to make sure that all of our agents can sell all of our listings. So it's important for us to be transaction brokers. That way we can all sell each other's listings and we're not limited to what we can do. Okay, let me go back. The next thing we're going to be talking about, let me push this over here, is VOWs, which are virtual office websites. So virtual office websites are, again, another syndication tool. What virtual office websites do is they allow other automated estimations of your listing, and they allow outside third parties to write comments and reviews on your listings. If this is something you do not want to do, you can certainly mark does not authorize, and then we will make sure that when we enter it into the MLS, we don't allow that. Some agents don't like the ability for other people to comment on their pricing or, you know, reviews and things like that, so they like to disable that. But that is between you and the seller. I really don't see much harm in this. I usually will leave these blank. I like those automated estimates. Sometimes they work in my favor. So I usually leave those empty and go with what's there. Now it comes down to the seller obligations. So just like as a brokerage, as a listing brokerage, we have certain obligations. You know, we have to market the property. We have to present the offers. We have to, you know, get in touch with the seller. We have to really do a lot for the seller. But guess what? The seller has obligations to us as well. So part of those obligations is that they're going to cooperate in carrying out this agreement, which means that they're also going to refer to us any inquiries on that property. So if they're sitting at their front yard and they've got somebody that walks by and it's a buyer and they're talking to them about, you know, purchasing the property, they really need to be giving that inquiry to us because we're representing them as the listing office. It also says that we are going to be subject to certain MLS obligations and potential penalties. It then says that the seller is going to be providing us with keys to the property and make the property available to show. If you're talking to a seller and that seller says, you know what, I don't really want you to be able to show this property, or, you know, you only have 2 hours a week that you can show this property, that's going to be really hard for us to show this home. The worst is when you have tenants. Now, most tenants are very easy to work with. They are allowing us access and whatnot. But sometimes you have tenants that are very upset that the seller or that the owner is selling the property. So they make it very difficult for us to get into that home. And in doing so, sometimes we can't access that property at all. That doesn't work for us. We have to be able to allow access not only to ourselves, but to other agents to show that property. So this says that the seller is going to allow us appropriate access. Now, I understand there's some short-term rental communities out there where if there's a guest staying there for a week, you may not be able to show it because it's a vacation home. I get that. But reasonable access is when that vacationer moves out, you then have access to go show that property. Also, it says that you're going to be that the seller will inform the broker and before they do any mortgages or leases or anything like that to encumbrance the property. They're also going to hold us harmless from any losses, damages, and expenses, including attorney's fees. There's a whole bunch of things that you should read. I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little bit because I want to make sure I'm staying on track. Also, it tells us that they're going to be performing any acts necessary to comply with FIRPTA. FIRPTA is the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. That is if your seller is foreign. If they are foreign, there are certain tax documents that they have to fill out with their CPA. This shows us that they are going to properly agree to complete those tasks. They're going to make sure that they disclose any material facts about the property. This is a super important one, guys, because when you have a seller, it's so crucial that they disclose any known material facts about that property. You do not want to be hiding something like a flood or termite damage or structural damage. The seller needs to be very upfront and honest when they disclose that. In fact, we have a seller's disclosure that we're going to be going over shortly. Next, it says that we advise them to consult any professionals regarding taxes and legal issues. We are not professionals. We are mere real estate agents. We fill out forms that are prepared to us by attorneys. However, we want to make sure that we don't give legal or accounting advice. So if your seller has a question about a legality of our exclusive right of sale listing agreement, advise them, talk to an attorney. We encourage you to talk to an attorney because this is a document that is a legal document. We want them to feel comfortable with it. We're not attorneys and we don't want to interpret the law. So it's best that they talk to an attorney to, squash any concerns they may have. Next, we're getting down to the compensation. So this is going to be the total compensation that the seller is going to be paying us. So many of us strive to get 6%. Now, if I get 6% from the seller, it doesn't mean that I'm getting 6%. It means that I'm going to be probably splitting that with another agent. So this is total commission. In real estate transactions, the seller pays the full commission. Buyers don't pay the commission. The sellers do. So the sellers are paying the commission for possibly two agents, the one representing them, which is the listing agent, and then the one representing the buyer, which is the buyer's agent or the sales agent. Okay. So this is going to be total compensation. Now, normally we try to strive for 6%. No, I'm not really allowed to talk about, we don't do any sort of price setting or commission setting. Most of us, though, as agents historically strive to get 6% total. The reason why is I have to split this with another agent. When you go into the MLS and you have to do an offering in the MLS, first of all, if you're advertising this property, you have to offer something to another agent. There absolutely has to be an offering in the MLS to the buyer's agent that brings you the buyer. I usually set a standard of 2.5%. I feel like 2.5% is what the minimum that you should be offering to other agents in the industry that bring you a buyer. Why? Number one, we're not a discount brokerage. We want to be fair to our fellow realtors. Number two, if you were showing this property, would you like to be offered 1% or would you be like to offer 2.5% or 3%? Last but not least is we really kind of want to be fair to everybody out there. We all try to strive to be, successful in this business. If you're getting a 5% commission, offer out 2.5% commission. Okay, so we don't want to be considered a discount brokerage. We do want you to be fair to other brokerages, and that's why we ask that you offer at least 2.5% to other agents. I went ahead and put 5% in this particular case. Let's say I was not able to negotiate 6% like I wanted to. The seller agreed to 5%, so I'm going to go ahead and take 5% total commission. I'm going to split it 2.5 and 2.5 with the other agent. Right here in this block, this is where I'm putting our transaction fee. Remember, every seller or buyer that we represent at Century 21 Coyote, we have a transaction fee. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right there where my compensation is. So the seller ultimately at closing is going to owe a 5% commission as well as a $365 transaction fee to Century 21 Coyote. The next bit, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but what I am going to say is if you do have to fill something in, or if you do want to fill something in for both 112 and 115, I would say put 5% here and 10% here. The reason why is on number 12, this is for an option. So this is where the buyer sets up an option with an option to purchase the property at a later date. I'm still going to put 5% here because even if that comes into consideration, I still want to get paid on my efforts. I'm going to put that there. These don't happen very often, but if it does happen, it at least gives you the full compensation on that. Line 115 is related to if the seller decides to enter a lease during the lease listing agreement. So if you have a seller and that seller decides that throughout the lease or the listing period that he instead wants to lease the property, this would give you a 10% of the gross lease value to come to you as a commission. So if you want to fill something in, you can. If not, you don't have to, but I do advise you maybe protecting yourself and putting something in those two lines. The next talks about the broker fee. So this talks about when we're due our commission, but really importantly is I want to talk to you about what this protection period is. So go through and read here. It basically says that if we give you a buyer and it's in full terms, you're going to pay us commission. So there's some caveats that allow us to get paid a commission even if the property doesn't necessarily close. In this particular case, though, there is a blank here, and you'll want to fill in something for your protection period. The protection period allows, or actually protects you, the agent, as well as us, the brokerage, for any potential interest in the property during the time that it was listed. So let me use the example. Let's say that I have a 6-month listing, and 2 weeks before the listing expires, I show the property to a potential buyer. Okay. 2 weeks later, the listing expires. Okay. But I have 180 days filled in right here. So what that means is from 180 days from the time of termination, whether it's the expiration of the listing period, or if it's a mutual termination of the listing period, I'm protected for 180 days for anybody that I procured during the listing period. So if I had showed that property 2 weeks before the listing ended, and that buyer came back to me and made an offer, I'm still protected on the list side. So really fill in 180 days there. It gives you a protection in case the buyer decides to cut you out of the deal and talk directly to your buyers, whatever the case may be. And those situations do come up. This is your protection period for that particular buyer. As we scroll down under retained deposits, a lot of us put 50% here. What this means is if we have a potential pending contract and that contract falls through, and my seller has the ability to retain the deposit from the buyer, this would entitle us to 50% of those deposits, and it would be processed as a normal check, normal commission, but you would be entitled to 50% of that. So it's up to you whether you want to do that or if you want to mark 0, but this would entitle you to 50% of that deposit if the seller were to retain that from a deal that had gone bad. Under section 9, actually, I want to stop for just a second. I want to make sure that we don't have any questions. So hold on one second, guys. Oops, hold on one second. I didn't mean to do that. Hold on one second, guys. Okay. Okay, so now I want to start talking about, let me make sure, everybody can still see my screen, right? With the contract, perfect. Okay, so now we're talking about section 9. We're now talking about the compensation to other brokers. So this is what are we giving out to other brokers? Remember, if I'm doing 5% commission total and I'm going to be splitting it, that means I'm going to be giving out 2.5% to outside brokerages. So this is where we talk about the compensation for other brokers, okay? So that's what section 9 is about. So in this case, it's asking us, out of the 3 various relationships that our buyers can form with us. Remember, buyers can have a transaction broker relationship, they can have a single agency relationship with their agent, and they can have a no relationship agency. This is basically what are we offering to agents from each of those agencies. So I'm going to go ahead and say 2.5 across the board, whether you are representing yourself as a single agent to that buyer, whether you're representing yourself as a transaction broker for that buyer, or rather you're representing yourself as a no brokerage relationship, I'm going to offer you the same. I'm going to offer you 2.5%. So this is how you fill that in. Very important thing right here, though. Remember, it does not allow you to say no. If you mark none, the property cannot be placed in the MLS. So if you want that property to be eligible to be placed in the MLS, you have to offer a cooperating brokerage to other agents, okay? It is a requirement, okay? Under the brokerage relationship, this is where it talks about our transaction broker relationship. This is where it says that we can represent both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction, which is what I want to do. I want my fellow Century 21 Curiotti agents to be able to find a buyer and bring them to us. That way we're representing both sides. It's called double dipping. We all have names for it. It's a good thing. It means the brokerage is representing both the buyer and the seller. So that's what a transaction broker means. Under conditional termination, it says that under certain terms that the seller may withdraw their listing from us. This is a mutual termination. It doesn't mean that the seller can just do it automatically. Al has to confirm it. But if the seller wants to terminate their listing agreement, you can charge a cancellation fee. So let's say that I have a listing for 6 months, and 4 months into it, my seller decides that they want to cancel. They're not happy with me. Katie, you've done a horrible job. I'm just really not happy. Well, in that case, I can either charge them a $350 fee, or you can charge them $0. It's up to you. Now, normally, you know, as a brokerage, we do encourage you to charge a cancellation fee, but it's really up to you. The way I look at it is like this. If you are spending money out of pocket, let's say you're getting a $500,000 listing. You've spent $200 on photos. You spent another $100 on print marketing material or flyers or whatever it is you have done. Charge a cancellation fee. You know why? Because you at least should be recouping the expenses that you lost trying to market this property. So this says that if the seller chooses to terminate the listing early before the expiration date, they will owe us X number of dollars. Okay, I have some agents that, hey, I'm listing a $1 million property. I'm putting $500 there because guess what? I spent that much in my drone videos and my professional tours that I did. So it's up to you if you want to charge that cancellation fee. Under the dispute resolution, this is where it's important because this basically says that if the seller and our brokerage have a disagreement, that we will try to resolve it amicably through arbitration. We're not going to start suing each other. It's going to be something that we're going to try to work it out through arbitration, and your sellers are going to be signing right there. Other than that, it basically at the bottom, you know, it's important if you want to reiterate, you can put in there that the seller is going to pay that additional $365 transaction fee. However, like I mentioned before, I usually put it right up here as included in the original commission. So I usually put it right here under where it says line 109 under section 8. So that is really it. The good thing is that the exclusive right of sale listing agreement is very simple. There's not much to it. It's basically fill in the blanks, you know, plug and play sort of a thing. It's not like filling out a contract. So next we're going to move on, and I'm going to breeze through the rest of these, but I did want you to see that because that was the most important document. Now again, read through every line, every word of that agreement, because you have to understand it. The more you read through it, it's going to make sense to you. What are our obligations as a listing brokerage? What are the obligations as a seller? We both have to work together for one ultimate purpose, which is to sell that property, but we both have tasks and responsibilities with that listing agreement. The next thing we're going to talk about is the residential data entry form. So when you list a property in the MLS, and I'm going to switch over and I'm going to show you what the MLS listing for this property looks like. So this is the property that I've been talking about, which is one of our agents, Gita. All of this information right here, see where it says garage features, new construction, the annual fees, whether it's in a flood zone, the room dimensions, whether there's a fireplace, whether there's floor covering, what type of floor covering, all of these things have to be inputted by the listing agent. So all of those various things, the details that you see on the MLS, we have to have that information to put it into the MLS. One of the most probably time-consuming documents that you're going to have to do as a listing agent is going to be the residential data entry form. This is something that is about, I want to say it's about 13 pages. It's a hefty form. This is all of the information that we as admin, or you as a listing agent, if you're listing your homes yourself on the MLS, this is the information that is crucial for us to have to be able to enter that information. As a listing brokerage, we have to have certain minimum questions filled out. Everything that you see in red has to have an answer to it. Has to. We can't enter it and we can't save it as active without this information in red. Okay, so as a listing agent, the best advice I can give you is to look at the MLS. Look at what other homes and other, properties in that community are doing. But most importantly is talk to the seller. The seller's going to be able to give you the majority of this information. The other thing I like to do when I'm filling out this particular form, because this form has to be filled out and then your seller has to sign off on it, okay? The best thing I think about this form is go to the property in person. You sit down at the property, you figure out, is there a pool? What type of pool is it? Well, it's got this, it's got a screen enclosure, it's heated, it's got a diving board, it's got all these different things. The easiest way to do this is to be sitting right at the property. You can see the type of landscaping, you can see the directions, you can see if there's street lights on the street. All of these things, again, everything in red has to be filled in. Things like, is there a basement, a crawl space, a slab? Again, the first time you do this, it is a little overwhelming because you're a little bit confused as to what to enter. But just keep in mind that everything in red has to have an answer to it in order for us to successfully enter it. Also keep in mind that as admin and managers, we are not going to guess at any of this information. Why? Because I'm not going to guess when it comes to crucial information about a listing. So we are going to rely on you and the seller to give us the correct information. If you don't know it, go back to the seller and ask them. But the residential data entry form is going to be every important thing. Now, much of this you can get directly from the public records. Many of it you can get from the seller, but this is everything and anything we need to get it into the MLS. You also need to have a standard amount of listing photos. So suggestion is take a minimum of 10 listing photos. Front, back, inside, outside, maybe some of the community pool, the community clubhouse, maybe there's a really great playground that they have there at the community. Take as many photos as your heart desires, 30 plus if it suits you, but the more the better. Don't just take 1 or 2 photos. That's very poor marketing. In fact, Century 21 requires a minimum of 6 for it to even be on their website. So make sure you're doing a lot of different photos. Also, keep in mind that you will need to do room dimensions for every one of your rooms, or at least for the major ones. In fact, with the rooms, you are required to do certain things like living room, kitchen, master bedroom, and I think dining room, but there's certain rooms that you're required to not only do room dimensions, but also list the type of floor covering and the level that it's on. This is a great example of why you want to get one of those laser room dimension or measuring tapes where you can do it digitally. You can stand right in the property, you can get the room dimensions, bing, bang, boom, you've got them on there and you can put them right on your form. So that's a residential data entry form. It is a form that's going to be very time consuming, like I said, but once you have it filled out and it's completed, this is all of the way that we as admin are going to be able to enter that listing for you. So it will take some time. Make sure it's correct. Make sure the seller signs off on it. That way we know that the stuff we're entering is agreed upon with the seller. The next form I'm going to show you is going to be the Century 21 Coyote Buyers and Sellers Disclosure. If you've worked with buyers before, this form is familiar to you. Whether we represent the buyer or the seller, we do request that you get your particular client to sign this form. This is where it talks about certain, these are certain little things that we want to protect you and us. So many of the little disclosures here are ways of saying, listen, it's your due diligence to do that. It's on you to do this. We also disclose our $365 transaction fee, which is in here, so it is disclosed there. But this is only an agreement between us and our client. If the buyer is from Watson Realty, we don't need them to sign this. This is really between us and our seller. So the Century 21 Buyers and Sellers Disclosure is only a form that we sign between us and the clients of Century 21 Coyote, nobody else. The next thing we're going to be talking about, hold on one second, is going to be, hold on one second. I want to see if I can see my chat. Hold on one second. I feel like I'm missing chat messages and I don't know how to see that right now. So hold on one second, guys. Hopefully nobody is sending me chat messages. Okay, I think we're okay right now. If you have sent me a message and I haven't answered it, you may want to unmute yourself. I'm not able to see my chat right now, but just unmute yourself if you have any questions as we continue. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be the seller's property disclosure. So the seller's property disclosure is going to be your seller's opportunity to disclose any known material facts about that property that are important to know. This is your seller's chance to be completely honest. Tell the buyer everything there is to know about this property, good, bad, ugly, right? So it says right here on this form that only the seller should fill out this form. The last form we talked about was the MLS data entry. You're perfectly fine filling that out. That is the factual information about the property. This one is the seller's property disclosure. This one is only for the seller to fill out. Why? Because you don't live there. You don't know this property. Only the seller knows this property. So have the seller go through. Do not help them with any of this. Do not help them. Let them fill it out. In fact, there's even a category that says don't know. But have the seller go through and as honest as possible answer all of the questions. Has there ever been structural damage? Is there a certain type of wiring? Was there any termite damage? Has there ever been any fungus or water issues or flooding? Has there ever been any plumbing issues that we need to know about? This is your seller's opportunity to be as honest as possible, because what happens if they're not honest? The buyer's going to get a home inspection, right? And when they get that home inspection, they come back and they say, wait a minute, we're seeing that there was some sort of a presence of water damage here. What happened? And the seller says, oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's a big issue. This is the seller's opportunity to be as truthful and honest as possible. Tell them to disclose everything. With every real estate transaction, it's best for all parties to be transparent and as honest as possible. If there was a leak or if there was a flood, just tell them there was a flood. We fixed it. There's no flood anymore. Everything's good. We've gotten it fixed, but they have to disclose it. Okay. That's what's really important, because we don't want to find out after the fact. And now the seller has egg on their face because they didn't disclose it. It goes through very extensive. Was there any roof repairs? Is there any hot tub issues? Was there any sinkhole issues with this property? Has there ever been any lawsuits against the HOA? Has there ever been any issues with the HOA? Was this property built before the 1978 lead-based paint disclosure? Is there any litigation regarding the property? It's very, very complete, and it's a really nice disclosure. But again, it allows the seller to be as honest as possible, lay all the cards on the table, let the buyer know what they're getting into when they sign that offer. So this is your seller's property disclosure. And you're going to, of course, have them sign and date the bottom. The next form we're going to talk about is going to be the HOA, the Homeowners Association. Oops, let me go ahead and fill this in. I didn't do it in, I don't think I did that yet. Okay, so this is going to be your HOA addendum. Now, you will not really need this particular form until you get an offer, but it's best practice to get it filled out ahead of time. So what I like to do is I provide this, and this is only if the property is located in a community where there's a required HOA. So the single family home is located in a community, there's a required HOA, there are covenants and restrictions and required fees that go along with it. That's what I'm going to be using this for. I like to get it filled out ahead of time because it's something I can keep, and that way when I do get a buyer, I can quickly send it to them to sign. So this is something you're going to be filling out. Now you're going to be using 100% of your information from the seller and the HOA. You're not going to know this information, and we don't expect you to. So it's up to the seller to provide you with information. What am I paying in HOA cost? Am I paying recreational fees for golfing or clubhouse usage or pool usage or something like that? So you're going to have your seller fill this out, and it goes through and it says the name of the community. So you'd put that here, and it talks about, are there any special assessments for association? Do you have a monthly charge? Are there common use charges for the membership and things like that? So the seller's going to go through and fill this out. They're going to sign it. And then on the second page, it talks about certain things regarding the HOA. This is if perhaps maybe the HOA has first right of refusal, or maybe the HOA has other additional assessments or charges. You can also, the seller can list the contact person for the HOA. Now, one really good practice that I like to do is after I've talked to a seller, I like to confirm things, because if I'm going to put something on the MLS, it's going to have my name attached to it, and my reputation is important. So I like to confirm things. So what I would normally do is I'm going to call the HOA for this particular seller, and I'm going to obviously introduce myself, and I'm going to ask them if they can confirm the homeowners association fees for this particular community. That way I make sure that the information I'm putting on the MLS is correct. Try to make sure that all of the information that you are advertising on the MLS is indeed correct. If you don't believe that something is correct, like maybe the HOA amount isn't right or something, verify it. Don't just put stuff out there, because again, you're doing false advertising at that point. So make sure that whatever goes into the MLS is correct and true, and you've verified it with the seller. So that's the HOA and community association disclosure. And then we also have what's called the listing checklist. So this is the listing checklist, and this is a form that we ask you to fill out when you turn in a file on dotloop. There is nothing in here that your seller needs to sign. It's a very simple form. It is more like a file information form. It is the seller's name, the buyer's name, who's doing the, who, if there's a referral that we owe, who the title company is. Just important deadlines. This is important to us because it allows us to be able to record that transaction, have all of our important buyers, sellers information, be able to process it, and then hopefully be able to process it for you as a closing check and get it out to you. If you have any referrals due on any of your listings, like perhaps maybe a fellow agent in Pennsylvania gave you a referral, make sure you're telling us all that information right here when you turn it in. That way we know when we get the commission on it that we have to pay a referral on that. So that's your listing checklist. Before you turn it in on dotloop, before you submit that file, make sure you do complete this one, but there is nothing in here that your seller needs to sign. Other than that, you have some other optional forms that you can include, but what we covered today was the essentials. So the most important form that we have is going to be the exclusive right of sale listing agreement. This is the absolute end-all agreement between us and the sellers. This is the one that talks about our start date and our end date, and it talks about our commission. So it's very important that this is filled out correctly, and more importantly, that you understand what it says. If you ever need to extend a listing, let's say, for example, that you have a listing and maybe it didn't sell after 6 months, and you want to go ahead and relist that property or get it extended. Well, I'm going to show you that form. It's called the status change form. Oops. Let me see where that is. Hold on one second. I don't even know where it is. Hold on one second, guys. I lost it here. Right here. Okay. Let me go ahead and do this. So your status change form is going to be anything regarding your listing. So if you, it's under the templates, but the status change form is going to be anything regarding your listing. So let me show you what this looks like. So this is, let's say, for example, that throughout the course of your listing agreement for the next 6 months, your seller decides to reduce the price, or they decide to put the property back on the market after a failed, pending offer. Or let's say after 6 months, you haven't sold it, but they really love you and they know you've given it all your effort and they want to continue to extend that listing another 6 months. This is the form you're going to use. It's called the status change form, and you just simply go through, you enter the MLS number, the property address, and there's where you can make the price changes. You do the present price, what the new price is going to be. You could even do an extension, so where if they're going to extend it to a new date, you can certainly do that as well. So this is really your form that you can use for extending listings. For right here is where you put the new expiration date on that, but this is where you can maintain that listing. Keep in mind that your listing always has to be up to date. Also, if you come into the problem where maybe your seller cannot show it anymore, maybe they're going away for 3 weeks, and you're not going to be able to show it, believe it or not, you're going to need to take that property temporarily off the market because now it's not accessible. So there's a lot of MLS rules that hopefully you've learned through your MLS classes, But if you're going to be a listing agent, I strongly advise all of you to take all 3 of the MLS classes. The multiple listing service has 3 classes for you. It has the basic, which all of you have taken. It has compliance, which all of you have taken. But the third one is your ad editing class. Whether we as Century 21 Coyote admin enter it for you, or if you do it yourself, it's really good for you to take this class. So go to your MLS classes, take the ad editing class, even if we're going to do it for you. The reason why is it's important for you to understand how information goes into the MLS and why certain information is required. It's also important for you to know as a listing agent what is expected of you as far as making the pending property, when you get it under contract. There's a lot of MLS rules that go along with being a listing agent. So if you haven't already done so, take all 3 of your MLS classes. You've already taken the first 2. Take the third one, which is your ad editing class. That's going to give you that inside knowledge from a listing perspective of what's required of you as a listing agent. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing right now. I want to go back and see if anybody has a question. I do have a recorded link. I'm sorry, I do talk really fast. I'm from New England, so I'm chip, chip, chip like that. So I will send a recording out. I do have this recorded. I apologize. I'm one of these hyperactive people, and I do tend to talk a little fast. So if there's any other questions, please type them in, or if you want to unmute yourself, but I'd love to hear from you. It's very easy being a listing agent. The funny part is, even though it feels more intimidating, it should be less intimidating. Being a listing agent, the paperwork is super easy. It's one document, then you've got a bunch of information. You're not really negotiating a lot until you obviously get that offer. But being a listing agent is great, but you have to really be skilled at marketing the property. Make sure you're pricing the properties right. Make sure you're marketing to them to the full extent. Don't overprice listings. You know, do what the market value tells you it is, and don't overpromise a seller. When you take that listing, don't tell that seller, I promise you I'm going to sell it at 300, when you know darn well you're not going to get offers above 250. So be honest. Be transparent. Don't take listings that you know you can't sell. But when you get that listing, you get the paperwork signed and it's in the MLS, market it to the fullest. We have wonderful tools available to you at Century 21, including the Golden Ruler. We have unique property sites. We have Toolkit CMA. We have all these wonderful tools that you can use to market these listings to get a fast sale. You just have to use them and hopefully be able to service your seller. So if we have no other questions, hopefully everybody's good. I appreciate all of you joining me.
I have a question.
Listing agreements are not difficult. It's going through and filling it out. Hopefully I've explained that to you. However, if you get in a predicament, I'm going to drop my email into the chat box. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on one second.
That's it.
Yep.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I just paid for the MLS fee like a few days ago.
Okay.
So where do I take the class that you just talked about?
Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen, and hopefully I remember where this is. So let me share my screen. So if you're on, let me get into the MLS. Hold on one second. When you are in your MLS, and apologize because I haven't done this in a while, I believe it is under class sign up. So if you're in the MLS, under Stellar MLS account, you'll see something that says class sign up, and you should have also received something from the MLS with the suggestion of the various classes. They do require you to take your basic and your compliance class right away. But I believe this is where all the other ones are. So you have your ad editing class, like these are all right here. So there's one coming up on 7/22.
Yeah.
Right here. So you just go right into, and I'll show you right here. Under, when you're in the Stellar MLS dashboard, right here under the My Stellar MLS account, you'll see class sign up. And then it's going to open up all of the various webinars that are available to you. So you're going to make sure you take your basic, compliance, and the ad editing. Those are the only 3 classes. I mean, I'm sure there's some others there. You could do it in Spanish and stuff, but the main things are basic, compliance, and ad editing.
Because I haven't received anything yet from them.
When did you sign up with the board?
Last week.
And did you get your MLS email? Yeah.
They gave me the number, the confirmation number, but that's it.
Call over to them, and you could even ask them, but this is where you should be able to access. As long as you can get into your MLS with the login and the password, go right to where I'm showing you right here, and you should be able to take your classes there. If not, call to the MLS and have them email you those links.
So to go to the MLS, I have to go because I don't have I don't have the login.
Oh, well then call the MLS then. If they haven't sent you the login, you need to get that from them. So call the Board of Realtors. Are you a member of Orlando?
Yeah.
Call the Board of Realtors, let them know that you haven't heard from the MLS yet, and then they'll get you in touch with the MLS.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Does anybody else have any other questions while we're on it? Let me see. Perfect. Thanks, Chevy, and good luck with your listing. Yeah, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. You know, it's a very easy process. Once you've done one of these listings, it's going to become second nature. It's easy, but the most important and the most difficult part about listing a property is really finding that buyer. So it's a matter of pricing it right, marketing it right, and then being able to negotiate that buyer to find the right person and find the right deal. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Let me know if you need any help, and I'd be happy to help you. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.